All right, so what we want to move to is to how to handle JavaScript forms, and this is what most times you are going to be working with. So please take this section very carefully. JavaScript. Okay, sorry. So I'm going to write DOM. It's still under DOM 4.html. Oh, we already have 4, so 5. DOM 5.html. Okay, so we're going to bring HTML5 up, and so here I want to explain how you use how you can, importantly, as a matter of so I want to explain how you can process forms with JavaScript. So, if you remember earlier during the course of this class, I told you that as a software developer, you are going to be handling some very important things: text, images, forms, and videos. So if you go to google.com, for instance, what you most times deal with are forms. When you want to type into the search button, so that's the text area, you type inside and search. So there is nothing you do on a website that doesn't have to do with forms. So that is why I want to take my time to explain to us very critically how to use JavaScript for forms. So let's bring script here. It's going to be a kind of 30 minutes class. Script, enter. So we're going to call JavaScript forms. So how to process forms with JavaScript is very simple. All right, so next thing is that so let's look at a basic form and explain the elements. So form, so what's this? So a basic form has the attribute of action, then it also has the attribute of method. So method. All right, so if you are going to be writing PHP, you'll be making use of actions very well. All right, so action is the script that will run after you click on the submit button. So if you say something like slash, is giving us the example of script that we can run. So let me just do DOM4, so you see it now. Then method. All right, so this is the script that is being processed. This is the file that is being processed when I click submit on this form. So let me come down here. The method, this method can always be two: post and get. Post means you want to post the content of the server, so the content of the form to the server. Get simply means you want to get information from a server. Post is that you want to change information on the server. You want to post an information on the server. You would understand this more and more when we get to Node.js. When you start building API endpoints, .get, .post, but here this method here uses two options: post and get. That's what you will use mostly, and in most times you are going to be using post, because most times you will be using form to submit to the server. So so if we click submit, if you have a submit button, let's have a submit button, submit. So let's just see it. So I'm going to save this. So I'm going to save it and bring up sorry, just minimize this. Okay, so I'm going to save this and come here, change this one to .5, because that's the name of the file. So This is the form. Of course, nothing is there yet. So if I click submit now, you will see that it automatically loads /dot.html, and it said the file could not be accessed. So I don't really know why is that. So let me just put dot. I think it should work this way because they're in the same file directory. It doesn't need that /. So let me go back to this, refresh. So if I click submit now, can you see? The moment I click submit, it came to .4.html. The reason is because I said the action that must happen when I click submit is that this HTML file should run. All right. So if I did not put this, if I try to clear this out and click and go back, if I click submit, nothing will happen. Nothing will happen because it is actually referencing the form itself. When you make it empty, it is referencing that form itself. So that's for that. So put that in mind, because sometimes you might be building an application that after somebody click a form, you might want to go to a different page entirely with that action of the form. So that's that. So these are the two important attributes of the form that we're going to be making use of: action and method post. So that's that. So let's proceed to how we can actually engage with our form from the JavaScript. So the form element, we can actually have an ID here, call ID. We can give a form an ID and call it maybe subscribe. Let's say it's a subscription form that we want to collect email and name and email, for instance. So I love to name this subscribe. All right, so we can easily say, if you want to have access to that, we can easily say constant form equals to document dot get element by ID, of course. Then the name of the ID is subscribe. All right, so there is a DOM, there is a document, there is a way we can actually have access to all the forms on a page. Maybe we have more than one forms on a page, for instance. So let's say, for instance, we have another form, copy, paste. Let me give this one to, let me just call this one sign up. Maybe there's another form on the page, ID sign up, submit. So how do we get, we can get all the forms on that page using documents. So let me just console.log document.forms. You see how it's going to come out, document.forms. So we have, like I said, we have two forms now, one for subscription, the other one is for sign up. So let me go to, okay, so if you come to the console, that's why I just did console.log document.forms. If you come to the console, you will see the list of the form. The first form is subscribe, that's the ID, subscribe. The second one is sign up, subscribe. Those are the two forms that are available. So this HTML collection helps us to, it's called HTML control collections. It can help us to have access to the different forms we have inside an HTML element. So we have the sign up, we have the subscribe, and we use the ID to be able to have access to each of them. So that's that. So if you now do documents, look at this, console.log into document.form forms now, and put 0 like this. That means this document.com is returning an array of all the forms on the page. So for us to have access to the form array, to the first form, we need to use the index, which the index is always the first index to get the first variable in an array is 0. I think I've explained this in previous videos. So if I click, look at it now, it's actually bringing it for me. Okay, let me comment this out so that it doesn't confuse us. So let's refresh again. Exactly, so you can see it now. It's actually outputting the first form, which is form ID subscribe. Exactly. So the second form is this save. It's going to bring out the second form. Yeah, the second form with the ID of sign up. So we can use this method to have access to any detail inside the form. So let's go to submitting of form and how such a submitting works. So using the, for instance, let me come here. Okay, so we've already have this place type of submit. Then I can give it a value, for instance, a value of submit. A value of submit. I love to always use small letter. A value of submit. So we have two options for submitting buttons, submitting a form. You can use button type submit, or you use inputs. For the second one, let's use inputs. So the input type submit, then doesn't have closing, just this way. Input type submit, then we put the value to be submit. Okay, so that's the two method of having a submit button. As you can see, both of them submit. So I'm going to give some of them flesh as we proceed. Now when you click on the submit button, what happens is that the submit event is first of all fired before the content of the form that you are capturing is sent to the server. This way it will help us to be able to know if there are errors sometimes when you want somebody to fill email and you want the person to fill the right email. All right, so you want to check if it is phone number. You want to check if what the person is sending is not empty. So you use the submit event to be able to check before you now send the form to the server. So, and how do we do that? We simply do that by so we are done with this. So we can now say form dot, that's for the first one, ID subscribe, form dot add event listener. So the event listener that we want to add in this case is submit. You know, the event listener we've been working with is click, but in this case it is submit. So when somebody click on submit, so you know the type of event that is going out. So write function. Sometimes you don't need to keep writing function all the time, so we can just write the curly open and close bracket, put the event in front of it, then do something like this. Yep. So this is another way of writing function. All right, so we don't need to put the function here. We just put equals to greater than this. So that's another way of writing function away from the method we've been using to write the function. So let me do console.log into e.type. So let's check the event type. So you will be able to know that it is a submit event. That's why I said initially that the event that happens when you click on this submit button is always a submit event. So let me refresh. So let me click on the first one. Something I saw submit, then it cleared. So if you can see, okay, let me use a prevent default. All right, so submit, you can see console.log e.type. So the type of event that is being triggered is submit. It's counting it 2, 3. All right, if I refresh, if I click submit for the first time, the first submit, as you can see, the event that is being triggered here is the submit event. All right, so I've used e.prevent default because the other time it was not, it was submitting the form. It assumed that it is submitting it, it is not prevent. So this prevent default does not allow it to submit to the database. So here, when you click submit, what you do is here you can now submit the data to handle the form data. You handle the form data here, so you can easily see what the person has written, what he has not written. So as you can see, the event.prevent default will prevent it from submitting if things are not right in terms of what is inside the application. All right, so that's how it should work. So now let's go to how to access feeds of a particular form. All right, so how do we now check that we want to submit it, what we are submitting is right or wrong? So we're going to be using the first form. I'm just using this. I created this second form so that we can know how to access different type of forms if you have more than one form in your object. So h1, so we're going to click sign up. All right, so I'm going to create a div that give us the class of feed, then we move to label. We're giving it a label. The label for this input is name. All right, so maybe you want to create a sign up form, so name into label closes. So then the input where we are expecting people to add the information. So I think we've done form initially in previous videos. If you've not done it, please go and watch previous video. So the name of this particular input is name. Then let's put a placeholder, enter your name. All right, so something like that. Enter your name. Then I think it should be enter your full name. So input always have / at the end of it. So enter your full name. Then let's put small. Right, let's just add that. Then let us create the second div. This time around, we're going to make it email. Right, we're going to make it email. So this one is going to be email. This one is going to be email. Then we are changing all the IDs, all the IDs to email. So I'm changing all of them to email now. Now here, if I put the type to be email, by default the HTML will know that here is expecting email, and it will not allow the form to be submitted. Okay, I think just hold on. As you can see, please include an @ in the email address. So it can't submit the button because this is by default the web browser itself, this Chrome, because here I added email as the type of the input I'm expecting. So by default the browser knows that what we must enter here must be email. You understand? So but in those days most browsers does not have that capacity to detect. So somebody can be submitting this part of information into your database and the person will not be by mistake, and they won't be and you actually needed their email, maybe probably to communicate with them. All right, so that's why we need type. But if it is just text that we added, if you say the type is test, automatically it will submit the button and it will not ask for anything. Submit. As you can see, it's not throwing error because we say type of email is just normal text, so it means that anything can be added to it. So I think I would have to delete this form. I will just delete this form so that it will not be confusing us. All right, so that's that. So so the button. All right, so we now want to proceed to how we can have access to this particular form. So we can use the ID. So the ID of the form is already okay. Sign up. So I'm going to change the ID to sign up. Sign underscore up. Then here, so let me say constant. Let me now start from the beginning. Constant form equals to, so constant.form equals to document dot get element by ID. So get element by ID, sign up this time around because that's changed to sign up. All right, so then there are methods that we can use to have access to the information inside the input button. So like for instance, if I want to get the value, the name somebody is typing inside here, like Tosin, all right, I want to get that name. Okay, so if I want to get this name, what should happen? So what I'm going to do now is that from here, let's just console.log. Let me console.log form. There is a method I can use to have access to the information inside the form. So that's form dot elements into name. That's the name of the ID. It's that way. From here, the ID is name, so that's why I call it name here. So if I save, let me see if I can. Uncut error, form has not been declared. Okay, constant form. Just hold on. Let me comment out all of this. I don't want anything to be affecting. Constant form get element by ID. Console.log form dot elements name. Okay. All right. So this is it. Input text ID name. So that's what I'm fetching out. Is getting the name element of the form. So that's the input section. So if I change this one to email, for instance, email, you see that it is the input section of the email that we are going to be consoling.log. As you can see, email. That's what is coming out. So now, how do we get the value? For instance, the value of what somebody is typing here. So let me say, when I say form, let me just use form dot add event listener. So when the person click submit, all right, I want it to echo, to give me the name. I want it to console.log it. Console.log form dot element into email. All right, email. So for me to get the value of that email, I'm going to do dot value. So this will automatically give me the value of what the person enters. It will console.log it out for me, and that is how I can get everything somebody is putting inside and sending to the database. So if I come here and I say I think it's saved, if I refresh and I type something like this and I click enter, so automatically it actually showed the email email at, okay, let me just, don't let me type it, let me click enter. You will see it came up. So but because it is submitting it, I need to use prevent default. So that way I need to put the event here, because before I can call it here. So if I type anything now and I click submit, so the F is still coming out, and it's not even preventing the default, for instance. I don't know why, maybe I didn't save it. It's even showing error. It's showing an error, caught error. Okay, so let's just proceed. We'll get to that later. So rather than coming here, so I will come here, I will just type. So we've been able to understand that. So I'm going to create a constant name. I want to have access to the details that the person enters. So I'm going to say name equals to form dot element, okay, into, when you start writing React, you would understand this email equals form dot element into email. All right, so it helps us to get those information. So now after that, we'll now create full name. Maybe we want to get the full name of the person. Full name equals to name, this name dot value. That's the value that the person actually entered. All right, because whatever I'm typing inside becomes the value of what I'm typing. So dot value, then let's email equals to email dot value. Right, so that's email address. Let me just change it to email address so that we can actually have how it is a form now, such that it can make a bit of sense. So so this CSS file demo.css is what I'm going to use to style my form. Then I'm referencing it here. So if you don't have it, just type link, that's with relative to what attribute, style sheet, href dom.css, supposed to be demo.css. Now this is long and you might not be able to type directly from here, so I provided a link to all these codes inside my GitHub account. I'm going to drop that link at the video description. Then when you go to my GitHub account, you see Citademy, then under the Citademy repository you will see demo.css. So you can just copy everything here and paste in your own file. All right, so this is my GitHub account, so you can follow me on GitHub as well. So you can create an account on GitHub. As we proceed, I would explain about Git in the future. So you can create an account on GitHub and you just follow me. So I'll call it Tosin Hub. I don't know why it is Tosin Hub when I created it years back. So I might change it later to Tosin Hub eventually. So, but just copy it so that your own form is going to look exactly this way. All right, so let's now go ahead to add the JavaScript that will help us with some basic things on the DOM. So it's going to be a long So first of all, what we want to do is that when somebody clicks submit here, I think I'm going to also remove this for now. All right, so we are here. So when somebody clicks submit, so one thing we want to happen is that if the person did not enter name here, we want a message to come up, like a message. The message will come up directly in between this small section. The message will come up in red format here. Please enter your name. But we'll be using JavaScript to make that happen. So this is, you start appreciating how JavaScript is. Can you see now? Please enter your name. So, but we don't want this please enter your name happen until when you click submit and you didn't enter anything here. All right, so that is what we want to do, and that is what will be introducing us massively to JavaScript in a bigger form. All right, so let's proceed. So the button type is submit. I'm going to give it a class of full. All right, so let's proceed now, one after the other. I'm going to be explaining what we need to do. So first of all, we need to show here if somebody enter. So I need to remove this. So that class full that I just added has allowed this to come up well. So it's supposed to be full. So let me see other class things I need to add so that it can take everything from the text section. So div class feed. Let me see coming. So I need to put this in a container. I need to put everything in a div and call it class container. Then I have to bring this I think outside of the form. So save, let's see. All right, so it's coming up better. I didn't apply all the CSS yet, so that's why it didn't represent well. So it's a bit better now. All right, that's the beauty of CSS. So what other class do we need? I think the button also, we need to put it within a div of class feed. Yeah, shortcuts. Some of you will be saying, how am I doing that? Just go back and see. You don't need to be learning all the shortcuts for now. You need to be typing so that you get your hand used to it. So div feed as well. Then I think that gives us all we need to have there. So let me go back here. Yeah, makes a little bit of difference. So first of all, if you did not put your name here, we want a function that would create this error message and output it. So I'm going to go back here to remove it. It is JavaScript that is going to give it to us. So I'm going to remove it. I will come down and here, so we are going to start using JavaScript to run the experience. So we're going to create a function and name that function show message. Function show message. Yeah, you start. So this is the beginning of your coding, because many things now will be looking scary henceforth, but just get used to it. So this function will be taking 3 inputs. It's going to take inputs. It's going to take 3 parameters or dummies. Like when you call show function, we're expecting that you pass 3 parameters in the function, or else it will not work. Then message, then type. All right, so you get to understand it as we proceed. So that's the first function. Then we come here, we create a constant message, and we're going to say input dot input dot parent node. So we want to go to parent node of this of small dot query selector. I think we need to. So this input, this is the input I'm talking about. This input, that's what I call here input. I want to access the parent node of the input that you are going to be passing the parent node. Then I want to use the query selector of the particular input to get the query selector called small, because that's where we want the message to show, small. All right. So now please listen to this very well. Some of you might find it very confusing around this section. This input we are calling, you cannot just call input. That input was a dummy in our function, and that's why we call input. So we want to access the parent node of that input and look for. So if this is the input now, we are going out of this input to access the parent node. The parent node of input of this particular input now is div. So inside the div, parent node dot query selector small. So we want to pass a message inside this particular small. That's what we're doing. That's what the parent node, this parent node is doing for us. So this parent node goes outside the DOM. It goes a step, is actually saying go to the parent of inputs, the input you are passing here. So if example the input is this particular input, the parent of this input, from what I taught you in DOM, is div. That's the parent. The parent of div here is form. The parent of this form is this div. The parent of this div is this body. So like that's how DOM works. So we are saying that this particular input dot parent node. So we'll go to the parent, which is div. Then we are now saying inside this parent, we want to look for the elements with the name small. That's why we now said input dot parent node dot query selector small. So we want to pass a message to that small. So and that is what we're going to do. So we're going to say message now, message dot. So we've already selected this small. Inner text, we want to give it inner text, all right, equals to this message, the message that is coming here. Oops. Message. Or maybe I should just change this constant to show message. No. Okay. Let me change this method to small elements. Small element or small message. Just so I just want us to have I just want us to know that it is this particular small that we want to put a text in between as a message that is supposed to show when something goes wrong. So we are now saying the message, this, so small message, small element, that small element dot inner text. I already told you about inner text, how we can use inner text to pass information to a particular HTML element. So we are now saying message. So we'll call, when we are calling the show function, we'll put the message here. Then so what would happen now here is that I'm going to say, okay, let me just put something to help us to understand this. Get the small element and set the message. So that's what this does. So we've gotten it here, we are getting it here, we are setting the message here. The value of the inner text is going to be the message we are passing when we call this function. Then from there we now move to input.class name. We now want to change the class name of this particular input. This particular input that we are calling, we want to change the class name to something else. Class name. The same way we have input.parent node, we can also call the class name and say equals to. So there is an if statement that we can use. So I want to say if coming. Okay, so look at it. I want to say, let me write this. If type, this type that we have here, if this type is success, that means if this message is success message, so we are going to change we're going to say I'm coming. So we'll say if type, we can easily say if type like this, that's if type is true. So I can say if type is true, that means if the value of type is true, then I want to change the input message. I want to change the input class name. I want to change the input dot class name. Okay, input dot class name should be equals to success. S input dot class name is error. So I'm changing the class name of the input. I want to change it to error. So success and error. Because from the CSS, we already configured what will happen if, let me search, control find, okay, error. All right, so we already said, okay, so input dot error, can you see test error dot error? So we already set it here in the CSS form. So input dot class name is error. Then this function will now return type. So that's all that happens with this function, that show test. Now there is a better way to write this in a single line. That's what I was trying to explain. There is a better way to write this in a single line without using all of this line in an easier format. I'm going to put it here now, but I'm going to comment it out because it can be confusing if you are new to programming. So I can easily say input dot class name equals to true, equals to if true, if type, that means if type is true, that's what it means. If it is not false, if type is true, set the value of, where is question mark, set the value of the class name to success. S, this is S, this S, change it to error. Right, so this line of code is the same as this line of code. All right, so I'm going to comment it out. You would see something like this in the future on how to, this conditional statement, how to just write it as a line like this. It might be a bit confusing, but let me just comment it out. You would remember in the future that you've come across something like this. So that is that. Now let us go to a function that shows error message and the function that shows success message. So show error. So this function would simply take inputs, all right, and message, then this return will now return show. We are going to return this function show message. You might have to watch this video again so that you'll be able to understand. You might not grab it at once. Now show message, this show message is what we want to return here. If there is error, we want to return this particular function, but the function takes inputs. So we must put input here, and this function, when you call it too, you must also put the input. So this input is going to be the input we have here. All right, as much as your code work, just keep going. You might not understand most of this, you might not understand it at once, but as you proceed, you will continue to get it. So this parameter, this show message, is taking 3 parameters. Input, already have the input here, because the input is coming when I also call this function. Message, this message. Then the last one is the type. In this case, because we want to show error, so that means the type is false. So because the type is false here now, here, this is if it is true, this is else if it is false. If this else means if it is the opposite of true, which is false. If it is false, then the input class name will be set to error. So that's why we put false here, because it is actually error. So but the function for, we are going to create another function to show success. That's show success message. Show success message. So the same thing is going to take inputs and message. Then here we are going to return show message into input comma message, but in this case it's going to be true because it is a success message. All right, so now we are going to also create a function that will help us to know if a particular input has value. So what it means is we want to check if I type something here, if there is a value inside. So if there is a value here, I want to check so that when I click submit, I won't submit empty message. So I'm going to come here, I'm going to write another function. See a lot of functions now. All the functions are calling on that function. As value. So here I'm going to also call input, then the message. So I would say if the input dot value, that's the value that is going to be in the input that we are referring to, the value that will be there, what will be typed inside. If the input dot value, I already explained to you here how we can get value, name dot value, email dot value, is the same method. So if the input dot value dot, we are going to trim it. We want to make sure that you can look up for what trim does. Trim JavaScript function, what does it do? So if it is empty, so now you observe that this is 3 equals to, this is 2, this if is just double equals to, but this one is 3. This double equals to is only checking if the values are the same without checking the type. But this 3, when you use this 3, is stronger than 2. This 3 is testing the data type, if the data types are different. So like you can say, I think I've explained this before, I don't need to waste more time on it, but subsequently I will see if I can explain the difference between, they are almost the same thing, but this one want to be sure that this is actually empty. So if it is empty, it's going to return, it's now going to show error, because here is not supposed to be empty. Show error. Then I'm going to pass the input here, input dot message. The reason is because here, this show error, anytime I call this show error 2, I must have input and message. Input message. The same way when I want to call show message, I must also pass 3 parameters. But in this case, it's only expecting 2 parameters, and all these values can be the same. Can be anything. Just make sure it is the exact thing you are mentioning. So if this is this, then return this. Else, that means if that's not the case, then return the value and show success. So show success. In this case, you just put only input. So the success function. Okay, so I think there is a mistake here. This show success there is no need for any message. It will just put it's going to only be input, then the message will be empty. So we'll just pass just an empty information here, just variable. I can create message equals to, okay, let me just put message equals to success. Let me just write it like that and put message here, okay, so that it doesn't confuse you. So message input message, but for show error I'm passing the message from wherever I'm going to call it. So I hope this is not confusing. Just make sure your code works. That's what is most important now. As you keep learning more, you will continue to have deeper understanding of everything we are doing. So let's now validate the email. Let's write a function that helps us to validate the email to be sure that the person is actually entering a real email here.